yeah, we got to get a handle on immigration, but you got to stop giving them a reason to come over. You know, everybody knows you just got to throw up a wall and maintain that wall. Apparently, Obama can't do that.
As Americans celebrated Independence Day across the country, demonstrators for and against immigration prepared for another showdown in Southern California. This week, the small border town of Murrieta has turned into a battleground over immigration, with raucous protesters blocking buses carrying undocumented children en route to a U.S. Border Patrol processing center in town. About 120 protesters came to Murrieta on Friday morning, with about one-third opposing immigration and about two-thirds supporting the immigrants.
Fleeing violence and extortion in Central America, the number of children migrating to the U.S. is on the rise. In Oaxaca, Mexico, families rest before heading north. Some families say they are running from criminal gangs who've threatened them and are trying to recruit their children. Others, like 14-year-old Gladys Chinoy, are traveling alone, but traveling with hope. There are some people that don't survive the journey, Chinoy says, hoping to reunite with her mother in New York City. She says if she makes it across the border, U.S. laws will help her stay. She, like others, think that once she arrives in the U.S., she'll be able to safely surrender to U.S. Border Patrol. Other migrants agree. The children are a passport to stay there, says this mechanic migrating from El Salvador. But as a man, I will be sent back. That perception is one the United States is trying to change, with the latest warning coming from the Homeland Security Secretary.
It is hot, it is treacherous, and you're placing your child in the hands of a criminal smuggling organization. This journey is a dangerous one, and at the end of it, there's no free pass. There are no permisos.
But for those still riding atop cargo trains south of the border, what they're fleeing keeps them moving. Padmanandarama, The Associated Press.
That's good. Hi there, I'm Jared Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
And we're talking about the truth and what the Americans are doing, and it's the wrong thing.
That's right. They've got a humanitarian crisis occurring on the southern border, and it's caused by their own foreign policy.
And, of course, banking policy is going totally out of whack. We're going to be talking about the monetary system coming up and the way they're doing it wrong. But right here, we're in segment 2, and we're talking about medics.
Yeah, and how they're complicit in malpractice, to say the very least.
This is about Gitmo. Check it out.
This is how the head of the U.S. Army Medical Command describes her group.
An organization founded on Army values, warrior ethos, and the sacred trust that exists between patients and providers.
But the military has fallen far short of that standard, according to a 2-year review of public records by an independent task force of American medical, legal, and ethics experts. The study by the Institute of Medicine as a Profession found that in dealing with prisoners, military and intelligence agency doctors and psychologists had taken part in abusive interrogation, consulting on techniques to induce disorientation and anxiety of detainees, used medical information for interrogation purposes, and force-fed hunger strikers. At Guantanamo, detainees on hunger strike have been force-fed in violation of a half-century-old ban by the World Medical Association. The report also accuses the Defense Department of failing to follow through on its own reform recommendations.
And even though there have been changes in interrogation practices, those rules are still with us and they undermine ethical practice.
In response, a Pentagon spokesman said other inquiries showed the allegations were unsubstantiated. As to force-feeding, he added, the department will not knowingly allow a detainee to commit suicide, not by means of a weapon, medication, nor self- or peer-imposed starvation. As of now, says the military, 14 of the 164 prisoners at Guantanamo are still refusing to eat regularly. A U.S. appeals court is currently considering their legal challenge to the practice. Tom Ackerman, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And of course, we have a very similar situation here where some medics, ERT people, emergency response teams, are having problems dealing with the way the RCMP treats people in custody. We had film on that with police brutality, and we're going to be doing a show on police brutality coming up. But remember, this problem is systemic.
That's true, and especially down the States and in Gitmo, where they're complicit in torture and forced feeding, that's just wrong.
Of course, we're also going to be covering issues about them forcing people to take blood tests for not blowing for DWIs, but something else that we could kind of mock and smile about.
Well, because, you know, the monarchy often gets it wrong as well. They have a huge issue with austerity, and they decided they need to renovate one of the homes of Bill and Kate.
I want you to check this out.
The British monarchy has defended the 7-figure cost of refurbishing a Kensington Palace apartment for Prince William and his family. Now, the bill for repairing and refurbishing the apartment, it has spiraled now to nearly $7 million. The high renovation cost has caused much controversy, with many critical of taxpayers' money being spent on the royal residence. A royal spokesman, however, has said that the couple paid for their own furnishings. The British royal family has always been under criticism for spending taxpayers' money on its lavish lifestyle. Some reports put the expenses at $340 million each year.
They traveled from across the country, representing different groups, but with a singular message. The austerity program is not working. Welfare reforms are said to be a crucial part of the coalition's plans, but those who came out to protest were keen to challenge the official government line.
We want to send a very clear message to the government that their policies should stop punishing the poor. They are continuing these austerity policies which are both cruel and counterproductive.
Anti-austerity campaigners say the government program of cuts have more to do with reshaping the very fabric of British society than actually balancing the books. And despite mounting evidence that it's the most vulnerable who continue to suffer the most, the coalition refuses to rethink the cuts.
With the government adamant the cuts program will continue, demonstrators say they'll keep taking to the streets until there's a change of policy. Amina Taylor, Press TV, London.
So have we mocked the monarchy enough?
Well, you know, they don't seem to really be in touch with the world.
No, they're not in touch with the world. They've been running it wrong for a historical basis for almost all of recorded history. And of course, we are going to record more about the history in our digital selves as we continue here at Radio Free.
Now, about a month ago, they held the D-Day anniversary celebration.
And it was a pretty serious celebration on both sides of the D-Day borders. In Canada and in Western culture, we seem to only talk about the D-Day landings that came in through Britain into France.
Yeah, they tend to ignore the whole Russian sacrifice that they gave up in World War II.
So let's take a look at this.
The 70th anniversary of World War II's D-Day landings to liberate France was commemorated by nearly 20 heads of state, but for many the nostalgia has been overwhelmed by the looming shadow of a possible Cold War II due to the unrest in Ukraine. U.S. President Barack Obama backtracked and surprisingly held an informal meeting with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Many hope the two leaders used the occasion to remember when France, the U.S., and the U.K. worked with the Russians to defeat fascism. While the combined deaths of D-Day may approach 20,000 people, it seems inconceivable that Western Europe could forget the USSR's contribution, as some 27 million Soviets died in World War II, more than 14% of their entire population. In the U.S., U.K., and France, the death toll was limited to around 500,000 people each.
In French schools, the enormous sacrifice of all the peoples of the USSR is completely forgotten. This is dangerous because people misunderstand the context of today's European politics, which is, after a century of wars that drastically reduce Europe's global influence, we are currently at risk of starting a new Cold War, which would be just as suicidal.
France escaped far greater devastation because the southern half of the country collaborated with the Nazis in what was called Vichy France. The subject of Vichy France is almost a taboo subject in France today, despite its assistance in deporting Jews, Roma, and other groups for mass slaughter. Yet despite today's acknowledgement of fascism's atrocities, neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine are finding political cover in the West and threatening Europe's peace. Ramin Mazaheri, Press TV, Paris.
So it's good to see so much covering. okay, you know.
Yeah, someone actually talking about the Russian contribution to the Allied effort.
Yes, and you know, the Russians really did contribute a lot. Cold War comes around afterwards, and then all of a sudden they're vilifying these people because of the way a few of their leaders were acting. Kind of
Well,
ridiculous.
you got to ask who it benefits as well, right?
Yes, follow the checkbook, man.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Niska.
You've been tuned into Video Radio, where we're talking about the right and the wrong things that are coming up. And coming up here, we've got a couple cool documentaries. One called Freeloaders, talking about those very people messing things up for us.
And also Warriors and Thieves is coming up, talking about the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East.
Remember, mission accomplished. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
Stay tuned. More to come after this lack of commercial messages.
Hi, my name is Marcin, farmer, technologist. I was born in Poland, now in the US. I started a group called Open Source Ecology. We've identified the 50 most important machines that we think takes for modern life to exist. Things from tractors, bread ovens, circuit makers. Then we set out to create an open source, DIY, do-it-yourself version that anyone can build and maintain at a fraction of the cost. We call this the Global Village Construction Set. So let me tell you a story. So I finished my 20s with a PhD in fusion energy, and I discovered I was useless. I had no practical skills. I mean, the world presented me with options, and I took them. I guess you can call it the consumer lifestyle. So I started a farm in Missouri and learned about the economics of farming. I bought a tractor, then it broke. I paid to get it repaired, then it broke again, and pretty soon, I was broke too. I realized that the truly appropriate low-cost tools that I needed to start a sustainable farm and settlement just didn't exist yet. I needed tools that were robust, modular, highly efficient and optimized, low-cost, made from local and recycled materials that would last a lifetime, not designed for obsolescence. I found that I would have to build them myself. So I did just that. And I tested them. And I found that industrial productivity can be achieved on a small scale. So then I published the 3D designs, schematics, instructional videos, and budgets on a wiki. Then contributors from all over the world began showing up, prototyping new machines during dedicated project visits. So far, we have prototyped 8 of the 50 machines, and now the project is beginning to grow on its own. We know that open source has succeeded with tools for managing knowledge and creativity, and the same is starting to happen with hardware too. We're focusing on hardware because it is hardware that can change people's lives in such tangible material ways. If we can lower the barriers to farming, building, manufacturing, then we can unleash just massive amounts of human potential. That's not only in the developing world. Our tools are being made for the American farmer, builder, entrepreneur, maker. We've seen lots of excitement from these people who can now start a construction business, parts manufacturing, organic CSA, or just selling power back to the grid. Our goal is a repository of published designs so clear, so complete that a single burned DVD is effectively a civilization starter kit. I've planted 100 trees in a day. I've pressed 5,000 bricks in one day from the dirt beneath my feet, and built a tractor in 6 days. From what I've seen, this is only the beginning. If this idea is truly sound, then the implications are significant. A greater distribution of the means of production, environmentally sound supply chains, and a newly relevant DIY maker culture can hope to transcend artificial scarcity. We're exploring the limits of what we all can do to make a better world with open hardware technology. Thank you.